In response to the Montréal protocole, which progressively banned the chlorofluorocarbons, the CFCs, responsible for ozone destruction, again, scientist Fred Singer founded the Science and Environmental Policy Project, the SEPP, in 1992. How was Singer's denialist strategy once again linked to the long history of American anti-communism?
One of the things that Singer begins to do quite consistently in the late 80s to early 90s is to accuse his opponents of being communists or socialists, and to say that environmental regulation is just a way to bring in communism for the back door. And so he writes a number of articles during this ozone debate in which he says, yeah, this is just an excuse to regulate the marketplace, and particularly after the end of the Cold War, communism has collapsed, but now these people are trying to bring in communism through the back door by regulating manufacturing, regulating every single step of the manufacturing process, is a phrase he uses as one point. So basically accusing scientists of bad faith, saying, oh, this isn't really about the science. It's not really about ozone. It's really about bringing in communism through the back door. And of course, this is a really preposterous argument. Again, it shows he's the one who's operating in bad faith. Because if you look at the key scientists who did the work on the ozone hole, people like Mario Molina, Sherwood Rowland, Paul Crutzen, not a one of them is a communist or a socialist. In fact, I don't even really know what any of their politics were, but these were leading prominent scientists. They shared the Nobel Prize in 1995 for their work, the Nobel Prize in Chemistry, not the Peace Prize, but the Chemistry Prize, hardcore, basic, fundamental science. And I knew Sherry Rowland quite well. I knew Mario Molina a little bit. Both of them were people who were motivated by care for their fellow human being and the recognition that left unaddressed, the ozone hole threatened life on Earth. That is not an exaggeration. We can talk about whether or not climate change threatens life on Earth. I don't think it really does. I think it threatens a whole lot of pain and suffering. But the ozone hole, without stratospheric ozone, eventually ultraviolet light would become so intense that you couldn't go out for a walk without being burned to a crisp, and ultimately there would be no life on Earth at all. And that was not a consequence that Sherry Rowland thought was something that most people would want. And so he felt very strongly that he had an obligation as a scientist to explain to people why this was such a serious thing. And it had nothing to do with political economy, had nothing to do with socialism or communism. It had to do with caring about life on Earth. And Singer knew that. Singer knew Sherry Rowland. He had met these men. He had talked to them. He had been at conferences. So it's really a bad faith argument. But it's a way of trying to discredit the science by saying, oh, this is just a hidden agenda. They don't really care about the science. They're just watermelons, green on the outside but red on the inside. And of course, that argument is made about environmentalists at all, that the environmental movement is essentially a socialist movement rather than it being what I think it really was in America, which was a movement to try to protect the natural environment and continue to make sure that we would all breathe fresh air and drink clean water.